Hi guys, welcome back to The Contented Plant. Today we are talking all about the croton. Some people pronounce it croton. I just say croton because it's a little bit easier for me. We are going to repot mine today and talk about all of its care needs. So I've had this plant for about a year and a half. I keep it right here on this bright windowsill. It grows pretty well. It's definitely time to repot it. It's October right now and it's not really cold here yet, so I'm going to take my chances. Honestly, I was going to just let it winter over, but I don't think I can with the roots coming out that much. So we're going to go ahead and stick it in a bigger pot today and talk a little bit about its care. Okay, so these plants originate from India and Malaysia. They're often growing outdoors in warm, humid places. You can find them in Hawaii, you can find them in Florida. If you live in a really hot, humid area of the world, then you can grow them outside and you can grow them indoors as well. If you live in an area where it gets cold in the wintertime, you're going to want to bring them back in before it gets cold. Otherwise, they will most definitely die in a hard freeze. So for this plant, I'm just going to use a standard potting mix that's peat-based, and I'm going to use extra perlite to add some drainage into there. Crotons don't love to have wet feet. Their little roots can easily rot. So we want to keep that potting mix really light and well draining. A lot of people don't really love this plant. It's actually a very controversial plant in the plant world. I've seen a lot of people say they just hate this plant for whatever reason. I like it. That's why I bought it. I don't mind it. I was a little bit scared of it because it does have a reputation for being a super fussy plant, really hard to grow. Some people say it'll just drop its leaves everywhere for no reason. I have not really had an issue with that. I have moved it 3 different areas in my house to kind of test out different lighting. I originally had it over in my living room on the coffee table. Then I had it sitting here on my dining table in the center, and I recently moved it back into this window. It's definitely happiest in this window. It's putting out the most amount of leaves it's ever put out. And they're also these variegated leaves. This is the newest one that it has put out in the window. It's a very large leaf, and it also has a lot of color and variegation on it, which tells me this is a happy plant and it really likes it where I have it. So I will keep it there. So you can see it has lots of small roots. This isn't a plant that has just huge, big, thick, tuberous-like roots. They're very thin. They're very delicate. I'm gonna have to try and not break them all off. I do have a clear pot. I love these clear pots because, especially for a plant like this, it gives you a really good window into what's going on with that root growth. So I am gonna stick this in a bigger pot, and we're gonna hope we don't accidentally break all these cute little roots off. Okay, so I got my new mix off to the side. So I'm just gonna gently start squeezing the sides of the pot. Ooh, that was actually really easy to get out. Probably because it's fairly dry. This plant definitely needs some water. You can see that it was getting root bound in the pot. They're all around there in a big circle. So I'm just gonna gently massage around it and see if we can take some of that old soil off without ruining that delicate root structure. Okay, so there are my roots. They are all freed up. They look fantastic. So we're gonna go ahead and put it in the new pot. Okay, so I want it to sit right up about this high. I've got the bottom roots down into a little well there. And then I'm just gonna fill soil in up and around the top so that this is about even with the top of this pot here. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of press that soil down, make sure we don't have any air pockets in those roots because we don't want to dry them out and have them die. I'm just going to take a quick look all around. It looks really, really good. We're just going to water this plant in a little bit. You can see it's a little wilty. As far as the watering goes for this plant, I definitely err on the side of caution. I do not like to water this plant very often. I will actually let it sit quite a while, usually about 2 weeks. And then when the leaves start to droop, then I'll go ahead and give it some water. The key to keeping this plant happiest is having really great light. You want bright and direct light all day. Periods of direct sun are also okay for this plant. It can handle quite a bit of light, whereas most houseplants can get sunburned really easily. This one can handle quite a bit more. It's definitely not a shade plant. So if you have it getting 3 or 4 hours of bright sun, as long as it's not too close to a window so that it does actually burn it, then it's gonna be fine and it's gonna be quite happy. Bright indirect light is also great for it. It doesn't really get direct light where I have it. It just gets that bright indirect light all day, and it's done really well so far. So I would say if you have a big bright window, it's probably gonna do the best there. For watering, I let this plant get really dry in between watering. I do not water this one on a regular once a week schedule. I usually will let it go for 2 to 3 weeks, and I'll really only give it water when I see it start to droop where it's kind of at right now. I can tell it's kind of half-mast, it's not super bouncy right now, and that's because it's just a little bit dry. So I will let it go quite a while, and then I will give it a good thorough soak. I usually bottom water it, and I make sure that the soil is fully saturated when I do water it. That way I'm not just adding a tiny bit at a time and keeping those roots constantly moist. This plant can be susceptible to spider mites or thrips or mealybugs, just like any other plant. So you're gonna want to, especially since it has these larger leaves, give it a good dusting every once in a while. That's a good practice for a lot of your house plants. Having dust sitting on the leaves can attract the pests and the mites to them. Spider mites in particular love dry, dusty leaves. So if you just give them a little wash once a month or so when you're watering, when you remember it, that'll keep your plant happy. It also helps the plant photosynthesize when it doesn't have a bunch of debris and dust on the leaves. I fertilize this plant once in the beginning of summer, and then I water it with my fish tank water, which has a lot of low dose nitrates in it, and that seems to be keeping it fairly happy. I would not pour a bunch of high, heavy dose fertilizer on it because you can risk burning the roots that way. And you just need to be extra careful with the plants. So I stick with a low dose fertilizer. So my top care tips for this plant would be don't move it around too much too often because it can stress the plant out and it can drop leaves. This plant is a little finicky and it is susceptible to shock if you're constantly moving it around your house. With that said, I have moved it 3 times, but I usually will leave it in the same spot for a couple months just so I can gauge how the leaf growth is, if it has new variegation on it, and then I know it's happy in that lighting situation. My other top care tip would be do not overwater this plant. Make sure you are letting that soil dry out, and when you do water it, go ahead and saturate the soil completely so it gets a nice, good watering. Keep it in bright indirect light or even a little bit of direct light, and you'll have the most variegated leaves. I've never tried to grow this in a low light area. I would assume it would definitely put out probably a lot of these just basic green leaves, but it also might really set the plant back and it might not thrive in a low light area because this is definitely not a shade plant and it's not a low light plant. Keep it in a bright indirect light with some periods of direct sunlight throughout the day, and I think you'll have the happiest, most beautiful croton. I'm just gonna stick it right in this pot. It's my little decorative pot I have for it. This pot does not have a drainage hole, but I'm not too worried about it because I have this pot that it's in that has lots and lots of drainage holes, and I just make sure when I water it that it's not leaking water into the bottom of the pot so it's not sitting in water. So I'm just gonna set it in there. Oh my goodness, look how cute that looks. I'm so excited. I haven't used this pot before. It's just been sitting in my little pot closet and I've been so excited to pull it out and use it. And I think this looks stunning in here. I'm very excited. Okay, that is all I have for today's video about the croton. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them down below and I will do my best to answer them for you. Otherwise, you can follow me on Instagram at The Contented Plant and TikTok at The Contented Plant. Have a wonderful day and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.